Welcome to episode 173 of FBI Retired Case File Review with Jerry Williams. I'm a retired agent on a mission to show the public who the FBI is and what the FBI does through my books, my blog, and my podcast case reviews with former colleagues. Today, we get to speak to retired agent Greg Shaffer, who served in the FBI for 20 years. During his career, he spent 6 years on the FBI's Elite Hostage Rescue Team, HRT. In this episode, Shaffer reviews the multi-agency response to apprehend the D.C. snipers, later identified as John Allen Mohammed and Lee Boyd Malvo, the men responsible for the random shooting of 10 people in the Washington D.C. area during 23 days in October of 2002. Shaffer also discusses the origin and the role of the HRT and provides safety tips, especially for when confronted by an active shooter. While on HRT, Greg Shaffer trained with Department of Defense Special Mission Units and foreign counter-terrorism teams, and conducted tactical operations in Iraq, Pakistan, Yemen, the Philippines, Indonesia, East Africa, and the United States. Greg is a FBI certified Crisis Negotiator, Firearms Instructor, Defensive Tactics Instructor, Firearms Instructor, Rappel Master, and Paramedic. Greg also served as the FBI's legal attaché in Budapest, Hungary. On 2 occasions, Greg was assigned to the FBI office in Dallas, where he served on the North Texas Violent Crime Task Force and supervised the North Texas Joint Terrorism Task Force. Greg Shaffer is recognized as one of the leading experts and authorities on the phenomenon of active shooter events and domestic terrorism prevention, and has appeared on numerous national television and radio networks. He is the author of Stay Safe: Security Secrets for Today's Dangerous World, and the founder and president of Shaffer Security Group, a global security, risk management, and tactical training specialty firm based in Dallas, Texas. You can learn more about Greg Shaffer at ShafferSecurityGroup.com. This episode could save your life. You're going to enjoy learning about the DC sniper and the HRT, but the safety tips are worth staying to listen to the very end. But before we get to the interview, I just have a few things here. Well, as a matter of fact, I have a little bit more than a few things, so please excuse the longer than normal intro. First of all, I want to make sure to let you know that the July Reader Team email went out on Wednesday, July 3rd. So if it's not in your inbox, you know what to do. Check your spam filter and whitelist me so that your email provider knows that you want to hear from me. In this month's Reader Team email, I provide a list of 7 places that you can learn about the FBI. I bet you can guess 2 of them. I also recommend a couple of true crime podcasts and give you my thoughts about the new FBI series on Showtime. Let's just say shoes were flying all around the room. If you're not a member of my FBI Books, TV, and Movie Reader Team, why not? Another thing in this email is information about the FBI Myths and Misconception virtual book club event that I'm hosting on Thursday, July 25th on Zoom. So I'll send you the link so that you can join me live on the platform, where I will be answering all of your questions about the book. Talking about the book, it's out. The official launch day was June 27th, and I want to thank each and every one of you who have already picked up a copy of the book and have started leaving your fabulous reviews, especially my launch team. I am thrilled that you like the book. I hope that this book, whether it's the ebook, paperback, or hardback, becomes the book for you to quickly get your hands on accurate information about the FBI. If you've read the book, please don't forget to leave a review on Amazon, which is the big dog of book retailers. Reviews help readers find good books. If you haven't picked up a copy yet, and you are listening to this episode on a podcast app, in the description of this episode, there's a link that will take you to a webpage where you'll be able to see all of the retailers where FBI myths and misconceptions, a manual for armchair detectives, can be purchased. Remember, I wrote this book especially for you. That's it for now. Thank you, and here's the show. I am excited to introduce my guest, Greg Shaffer. Hey, Greg, how are you?
Hi, Jerry. I'm fine. Great to be here.
Yeah, so I was introduced to you through LinkedIn. I saw that you have a brand new book out called Stay Safe: Security Secrets for Today's Dangerous World. And I thought to myself, ooh, now that sounds interesting. We're going to talk about your book at the very end, but give us a little tease so we know a little bit about what's inside.
Well, it's practical things you can do to maintain your situational awareness, develop that survival mindset so that in the event evil or violence ever visits your life or you're caught up in an active shooter event, for example, you know exactly what to do to increase your survivability rates. I wrote the book because I just got sick and tired of seeing people do the wrong things when they were caught in an active shooter event. So that was kind of the reason behind the book.
Well, unfortunately, there have been a number of mass shootings in this country over the last few years. It's heartbreaking, but with your background, you are the ideal person to help keep us safe in that situation. Now, you are FBI certified crisis negotiator. You're a firearms instructor. You are skilled in defensive tactics. You are an advanced tactical instructor. There's so many things that you are skilled in from the FBI, but we can tie that in a really pretty bow by saying that you also served on the FBI's elite hostage rescue team, the HRT. So, wow.
Well, you know, the distinct honor, and it truly was an honor to be selected for the HRT. It's one of the highlights of my life, serving alongside some of the most professional, warrior mindseted individuals in our great nation. HRT travels the globe hunting down the worst of the worst and conducting tactical operations alongside our state and federal partners. But a lot of people don't know is that the HRT also works globally. And with the global war on terror, the HRT works side by side with both SEAL Team 6, known as Development Group, and also Delta Force, known as CAG. We've been in the hills of Tora Bora, the caves of Tora Bora. We've been on the beaches of Somalia, and we've been in the deserts of Iraq, all with our military partners fighting the global war on terror. And the best thing about being on HRT was you got the best training that the world provides. And I took that training and leveraged it in writing my book, Stay Safe. Everything I learned on the HRT about staying safe and surviving those critical incidents, I learned through the multitude of training and courses that the HRT provided.
You just mentioned some international assignments, but of course the HRT is also deployed during national crisis. And the one that we were going to talk about today is one that I can't imagine anyone not knowing about unless, of course, they were very young at the time. And that's the D.C. sniper. And I know that the HRT played a role in that particular investigation. So could you give us a quick recap? And then I'd love for you to give us kind of an overview, a global look at the investigation, and then also hone in on some of the activities that the HRT were used for during that investigation.
Sure. The DC sniper case took place in October of 2002. So let's look at the time frame real quick. It was post 9/11. The anthrax investigation, which many of the listeners may be aware of, had just finished as well. That's where anthrax was found in several envelopes that were sent to members of Congress and that sort of thing. So terrorism was on the forefront of everybody's mind. literally 13 months since the towers came down. And two individuals by the name of John Mohammed and Lee Boyd Malvo brought a city to its knees for 3 weeks. When I say brought a city to its knees, all of Northern Virginia, all of Southern Maryland, and all of the District of Columbia, lifestyles changed instantaneously with the start of their murder spree. And their first two shootings occurred on October 2nd. And then the next day they shot 5 more individuals and continued to shoot innocent bystanders until they were finally arrested on October 24th, 3 weeks later.
I remember, of course, I was in Philadelphia out of danger, but I have family living in Alexandria, Virginia. And I just remember people were terrified that their loved ones were going to be shot. I don't even remember if at the beginning law enforcement had any idea where the shots were coming from.
That's true. On October 2nd, there were 2 shootings, both in Maryland. One at a Michael's store parking lot and another at a Shopper Food Warehouse parking lot. And, they came, I believe, at it was like 40 minutes apart, so very close to one another. You had 2 shootings that were, to the police, unrelated at the time. They didn't know if it was gang related, whether it was a domestic dispute. They had no idea that it was 2 individuals, shooting out of the back of a car. And then the following day, on the 3rd of October, they had 5 more shootings. And this, again, all of those occurred in Maryland with the exception of the final one, the 5th one that day, which occurred in Washington, D.C., but it was very close to the Maryland border. So you had 7 shootings in a very small geographic area from a high-powered rifle. So law enforcement was completely and utterly just brought to a standstill. They didn't have the crisis management experience. They didn't have the manpower to address this by themselves, some small state jurisdictions. So to their credit, the first couple of shootings occurred in Montgomery County, Maryland, which is, again, a suburb of Washington, D.C. And to the county sheriff's credit, they brought in the FBI very early on, knowing that they didn't have the manpower or the crisis management experience to do this kind of investigation. It was a unique time, Jerry. I mean, like I said earlier, it brought the city to a standstill. And what I mean by that is after those 7 shootings in 2 days, some were at gas stations. One was an individual mowing his lawn. One was at a Michael's parking lot, a Shopper's Food Warehouse, Leisure World, guy walking on the street. There was no consistency in the victims. They were black, white, Hispanic, Indian, male, female, young, old. So there was no target that we could look at that our profilers could get to identify who might be the next victim. These are so random. And the randomness was actually one of the huge factors that made this investigation so very difficult. But you look at the situation at the time, and when I say, the city came to a standstill, I mean, gas stations were hanging blue tarps in their parking lot to shield their customers from the street while they're pumping gas. We had Friday night lights and Saturday afternoon high school sporting events were canceled. I mean, think about you're a senior in high school trying to get a scholarship and your games are canceled. You lose that data, that proof, those films that you want to forward to the college of your choice to try to get that scholarship. These were all canceled. You had people running to Starbucks in a parking lot in a zigzag pattern. These are 2 individuals. One was 17 years old, and his deranged friend, John Mohammed. They literally changed the way people acted for 3 weeks due to fear. So again, October 2nd, October 3rd, 7 shootings. Then there's another one on October 4th, another one October 7th, 2 more October 9th, October 11th, October 14th, October 19th, October 22nd, and finally they were arrested October 24th. But I just want to run down those dates to show you this is such a compressed time frame. This is 3 weeks when they shot and killed numerous people. And what a lot of people don't realize as well is that John Mohammed and Lee Boyd Malvo were also prime suspects in 10 other shootings, which occurred in Arizona, Washington State, Louisiana, Alabama, and Georgia. These were cold-blooded killers.
Were those other murders in the other states the same way, just snipers, unknown people unrelated to them?
That's true. Well, one was a friend of his ex-wife. There were a couple there early on that has some kind of personal contact with John Mohammed, but the other ones were just random strangers.
Wow.
So again, this is a 17-year-old boy, Lee Boy Malvo, and John Mohammed. And you look at the details. Again, I wasn't an investigator on this case. I was on the tactical side of it. Again, the HRT, the hostage rescue team, was brought in very early on to work alongside the SWAT teams of the neighboring counties to capture and locate these individuals. And what we would do is we would be teamed up. It'd be one or two HRT guys with one or two SWAT guys, and we would just be patrolling Northern Virginia, Washington, D.C., and Southern Maryland. We'd be patrolling in unmarked vehicles, and when a shot rang out, we would, wherever we were, conduct a roadblock and look for what we thought were the shooters, who it was initially reported were in a white panel van. Now, why did a white panel van come into play? Well, if you look at that metropolitan area, there are white panel vans everywhere. So a shot rings out, a witness hears a shot, sees the man go down, looks around, and sees a white panel van driving away. And for some reason, that caused that witness to say they thought the shooter came out of a white panel van. So for weeks, we were looking for that white panel van. It came out, later on in the investigation that they were actually in a 1996 blue Caprice Classic. So let's talk about that for a minute. So John Mohammed and Lee Boy Malvo. Mohammed brought Lee Boy Malvo into the States illegally with his mother from Jamaica. John Mohammed was in his mid-30s. Lee Boy Malvo was 17. They were often confused as a father and son, but they weren't. They were just friends, and they developed a very close relationship. John Mohammed had lost custody of his kids and was very upset with his ex-wife. And his ex-wife fled, I believe, the Washington State area where they were living, and fled to Washington, D.C. with her two kids. Well, John Mohammed's plan, his reasoning behind this killing spree, was that he wanted to create random acts of violence and have his ex-wife be one of those random acts of violence. So in his deranged mind, he figured if he could pose the serial killer and kill random people and have one of those random people be his ex-wife, that he would never be a suspect, and therefore he could get custody of his kids. So that was the deranged rationale behind these shootings in the Washington, D.C. area in 2002.
I never knew that, or if I did, I forgot about it. That is absolutely, as you said, deranged.
It is deranged. Now, at the time, again, this is 2002, October, 13 short months after the towers came down. So everybody's thinking terrorism, terrorism, terrorism. Now, this was an act of terror, but even the Washington Post said snipers and Al-Qaeda was their lead story on, day 2 of the shootings. So everybody initially thought this was an Al-Qaeda-based attack because of the randomness of the victims, when in fact it came out to be that it was an act of violence from a deranged man who wanted to kill his ex-wife in custody of his kids.
How long was it before they were able to start putting these random shootings together?
It was quite a while. Before I get into that, Jerry, let me just step back and just talk about how they did this. So these two people were driving a 1996 Caprice Classic. The car itself was worth maybe $3,000. They bought a Bushmaster 223 rifle and an EOTech sight, which probably cost them at the time maybe another $1,000, if that. So all in $4,000 or less, they were able to bring a city of several million to its knees. And what they did, they drilled a hole in the trunk, in the back of the Caprice Classic, and then removed also the locking mechanism on the trunk. And then they removed a firewall between the trunk space and the back seat. The shooter would lay down in the trunk of the car with two holes, one hole above the other. One hole is where the optic could look through, where the EOTech sight could look through, and the other hole where the barrel could shoot out. And they would lay down prone in the back of the trunk and push the back seats down so they could be totally flat on their belly and take an accurate shot while never opening the trunk. So the sound was muffled, and a blue Caprice Classic they'd fire the shot, and he would drive away slowly and get away, without leaving any kind of evidence behind, no shell casings, no noise, no witnesses as to where the shot came from. It wasn't until those individuals shot a 13-year-old boy at a middle school in Maryland. So this was a 10th shooting of their spree. It happened on October 7th. And Iron Brown was 13 years old. He had missed the bus that day, and I believe his aunt dropped him off at school. As he got out of the car and started walking to the front door of the school, he was shot in the back.
Wow.
Now, up until then, all the victims have been adults. So this was a game changer. When you start shooting kids, it's a huge public outcry, and law enforcement gets really, really spun up when you start shooting children as well. So at that shooting, the shooters had left behind a clue. Now, the clue was not found until 2 days later. The FBI and evidence techs went back to the area where middle school shooting occurred, and they found in the grass where they thought the shot may have come from not only a shell casing, but also a tarot card, a death card. And on that death card, they left clues. They said, "Do not contact the media," and "Call me God" was their nom de guerre, their war name. "Call me God, do not contact the media." Well, unfortunately, that did leak, and the media found that out. But what was interesting about that tarot card, about that piece of evidence that was left behind, is they didn't ask for anything. There was no ransom demand. So that really got the investigators, the FBI, and the rest of the public really got even more fearful, because there was nothing in this clue to indicate they were willing to stop.
And was this the first time they had left behind some type of message?
This was the first time. Again, they had shot 9 other people before the middle school shooting and had left nothing behind. Now, what they did do, what the FBI and Montgomery County Sheriff did do, is they opened up a tip line, a phone-in line for tips, because, again, law enforcement had no clue what they're looking for. We didn't have a profile because the randomness of the victims. We had no idea whether they were male or female, young or old, black or white. So law enforcement was literally chasing their tails. So they opened up a tip line, which is a great idea, don't get me wrong, but they received over 100,000 calls in the first few days. That volume is just incredible. They also offered a $200,000 reward for any information. Well, this tip line included people who were leaving, tips and ideas of how we could catch the killers. There were people who are confessing to the killings that we knew had nothing to do with it. But in fact, John Mohammed did call and did leave a message, but it was lost in the 100,000 calls that they had received in a very short period of time.
Wow.
So there was a clue that was left behind, but it was never received by the FBI until several days later, when they had the manpower to go through all those phone calls. So they left the tarot card behind and continued their shooting spree. And, they again, more Exxon gas station parking lots, another Shell station parking lot, a Home Depot in Virginia where Linda Franklin was shot. And Linda Franklin's important because, no more important than other victims, but she was an FBI employee. So that hit really hit a home for the FBI investigators and for us on the HRT, that he actually shot and killed a member of the FBI family. And then the other big break came on October 19th. So again, the first shooting was October 2nd. So here we are, October 19th, and the shooters go down about 90 miles south of Washington, D.C. to Ashland, Virginia. And in a Ponderosa parking lot, they shoot a man there and leave behind more clues. Now, in this clue, they demanded a $10 million ransom and a bank account to transfer those funds. They also stated in a letter, and the letter, it was interesting, the letter was in a Ziploc bag nailed to a tree. They knew that the FBI and the investigators would be able to recognize where the shot came from in the Ponderosa parking lot. So they tacked the note to the tree in a Ziploc bag. Again, they asked for a $10 million reward, $10 million ransom to stop the killing. They indicated they would kill more kids. But then he made a reference to an Alabama shooting. And up until this time, the FBI was like, Alabama? How did Alabama come into play on this? So they made a reference to Alabama, and then they also left DNA on the Ziploc bag. Because every time you Ziploc that bag, you leave some skin fragments behind. And they were able to get a DNA sample off the Ziploc bag. They went to Alabama unsolved homicides that were similar to this sniper attack, and they found a case that had occurred earlier in 2002, where a gas station shop owner was killed and another person was wounded by sniper fire like this. And at the crime scene, they found a magazine with a partial print. Well, they reran that partial print, and it came back to Lee Boyd Malvo. So this is where the FBI really earns its stripes.
Well, let me ask you this question, because he was a 17-year-old kid, and most kids are not going to have fingerprints on file.
That's a great question, Jerry. And the reason we had prints on a juvenile was because he came across the border illegally. As I mentioned earlier, Lee Boyd Malvo was brought into the country from Jamaica by John Mohammed. And when he finally had a run-in with the immigration and customs people, they fingerprinted him as an illegal immigrant. They didn't deport him, but they took fingerprints and pictures of him. So his fingerprints were on file through the immigration system. So when they reran the fingerprints off of that magazine, they found Lee Boyd Malvo's print. And doing more research, they realized that John Mohammed was the one that helped bring Lee Boyd Malvo into the country along with his mother. So now they got the name John Mohammed and they got the name Lee Boyd Malvo. And this is where the FBI really shows its worth. Because when the FBI gets a scent, they're like a bloodhound. They're not going to stop until they find that person. So we have a name. Now we have a photograph. We know who they are. Now it's only a question of time. So what the investigators did is delve into John Mohammed's background, Lee Boyd Malvo's background, and they found out they used to live in the Seattle or Tacoma, Washington area. They went to the Tacoma, Washington area where they used to live and found an old tree stump in their backyard, which had bullet holes in it that they're using for target practice. They pulled some fragments of bullets from that tree stump, and guess what? Those bullet fragments matched the ballistics of the bullets being used to kill the victim in Washington, D.C. Wow. So now the FBI was fairly confident they had their man, John Mohammed, Lee Boyd Malvo, from Tacoma, Washington, were now using that same weapon that he shot the tree stump with to shoot innocent victims in the Washington, D.C. area.
I'm aware that before they were able to identify who exactly the snipers were, there were reports and profiles about who possibly could be the sniper. Do you recall any of that information?
Yeah, initially the FBI profile said it was a white male. That's only because based on statistics, statistically speaking, most serial killers are white males. And then at one of the shootings, I believe it was the one at the Michaels in Fredericksburg, or it could have been the Home Depot killing too. They had an individual come up and say he was an eyewitness and that he saw a Middle Eastern man with an AK-47 take a knee, bring his weapon up and fire a round. Well, again, he ended up being a false witness. They looked at video footage from the parking lot of the shooting, and it showed that the individual who said that he saw all this didn't even come out of the store until about 3 or 4 minutes after the shooting had occurred. So he was looking for notoriety. Again, you go back to the hundred thousands of phone calls on a tip line. A lot of people were admitting that they were the shooter, providing false testimony. Again, the FBI and the other investigators were really chasing their tails. And it wasn't until the shooters got a little cocky and wanted a little bit of notoriety that they made the mistake of leaving behind evidence that the FBI could use to identify who they were.
Yeah, that is surprising that they felt this need to communicate with law enforcement, because otherwise they probably could have gotten away with it for at least much, much longer. But it wasn't until they started reaching out and leaving the tarot card and things behind. And it wasn't even like they were careless. They purposely started communicating. And once they did that, investigators were able to, figure out very quickly who they were.
That's very true, Jerry. I mean, again, we were out on the streets stopping white panel vans. Well, a white panel van and a 1996 dark blue Caprice Classic have nothing in common. we were chasing our tails. We were hoping that somebody would see something where we could at least identify where they were shooting from and who they were. And until their own egos got in the way, and you were in the Bureau for over 20 years yourself, you know how egos play out. It's a very powerful motivator. And John Mohammed wanted to show the police that, that he was smarter than they were and they would never get caught. Well, if it wasn't for their own bravado, if it wasn't for their own ego, they could still be out there roaming the streets. It was due to their own missteps, their own egos, that got them captured, leaving behind that Ziploc bag with DNA and leaving behind the hint that you didn't catch us in Alabama and you won't catch us now. Leaving those behind was really the only reason we were able to identify them as quickly as we did.
I guess that part of it too, and you mentioned ego, was that other people were taking credit, and even, the profile was totally off the mark. And I guess they felt like, hey, wait a minute, we did this, and they wanted warped sense of thinking, but they wanted to get credit for it. Let me ask you another question when it comes to ego, because it appears that there wasn't a lot of ego when it came to all of these different law enforcement agencies and all of these different municipalities working together.
Well, in your new book, I'm sure you address this, the misconception that the FBI does not play well with others, as we say.
Yes.
And I just never saw that. In my 20-year career, the cooperation with local, state, and other federal agencies was fantastic, especially on the street level. We learned a hard lesson on 9/11. 9/11 should not have happened had the big boys, the CIA and the FBI, communicated better and worked better together. Now, granted, there were some political issues and some laws that prevented the national security branch from talking to the criminal branch. I understand that. But had there been better cooperation and communication between those two agencies, I think we would have seen the 9/11 plans develop a lot earlier and might have been able to prevent those. So again, this was post 9/11. This is October 2002. And we had learned a hard lesson that working together is the best way to solve crime. So, the FBI, the ATF, county police departments, city police departments, Washington D.C. Metropolitan Police Department, all the district attorneys and U.S. attorneys. They all worked together for one common goal, and that was to catch these guys. When you're able to shoot, 17 people in 3 weeks, that's a problem. And they knew that, they had little to go on until they left behind those cards, and the DNA sample. And it all came to a head at the end on October 24th. Once we identified John Mohammed and once we identified the Caprice Classic that was registered to him with a license plate number, we put that out in the media, or we saying the FBI. And, they did one more killing after the Ponderosa shooting down in Ashland, Virginia. They did one more shooting, and that was of the bus driver in Maryland. Bus driver was standing on the bottom stairs at a bus stop greeting his passengers, and he was shot and killed. And that was on the 22nd of October. And ultimately, on October 24th, a Good Samaritan, a truck driver who said he used to own a 1996 Caprice Classic, so he knew exactly what the car looked like. He was traveling down the highway in western Maryland on I-275 and put into a truck stop. And he had heard the news about the Caprice Classic being wanted and had listened to their license plate. And when he put into the rest area in Maryland, Frederick, Maryland, he saw this Caprice Classic and called 911. We were working 24-hour shifts on the HRT, 12 hours on, 12 hours off. And the team that had the on shift that night at about 2 a.m, we put snipers in the wood line. We snuck up behind the vehicle. We had some Montgomery County SWAT guys with us and some Maryland State Police SWAT guys with us. But predominantly was the HRT. And we approached the vehicle, broke the windows, opened the doors, and caught both John Mohammed and Lee Boyd Malvo asleep at a rest stop with the AR-15 sitting in the back seat. Caught them red-handed. Nobody was hurt or injured during the arrest, and they ultimately both stood trial, both found guilty. John Mohammed actually was executed in November of 2009, and Lee Boyd Malvo, because he was a minor at the time, was sentenced to a life in prison. A little footnote on that, the Supreme Court is going to hear a case to possibly have his case reheard because there was a case that has since gone through the system since Lee Boy Malvo's arrest that said that a juvenile cannot face a life in prison without a retrial, or at least somebody considering the circumstances of his situation at the time. So he may get not a retrial, but a readdress of his confinement to determine whether or not, now that he's 34, if he has been rehabilitated and can go back into society. But that was just news that came out like within the last couple months here that his case may be reevaluated because of that court ruling about minors being sentenced to a life imprisonment.
Well, this case, again, was one that you mentioned the fact that there was so much going on at the time. All of this bad news that was happening, 9/11 and anthrax, and then all of a sudden, the D.C. snipers, and it was an assault on the American way of life. And I don't think I'm being dramatic in saying that.
Oh, you're not. In fact, there is reports out there which show the decrease of that Starbucks had, the amount of business Starbucks had in those 3 weeks, the decrease in the number of customers they had as a direct result of the fear that these two individuals instilled in the public. I mean, people were just not going out. Again, sports games were canceled. The movie theaters were empty. Starbucks were empty. I mean, they had these two guys had an economic impact in the greater metropolitan D.C. area. Just two guys with an investment of $4,000. My greatest fear, we did a lot of this on HRT where we red cell things. That is, we think of worst case scenarios. I mean, you put two guys like this in 10 different cities in America, let's say, and start their shooting spree on Black Friday. Think of the economic impact it could have on the nation. And these are just two guys poorly trained, didn't know what they were doing, but had a technique in using that closed trunk skill that they used to shoot the weapon out of. And had it not been for their ego, they may not have ever been captured. But it puts fear in my bones to see that if somebody replicated this on a grander scale, what kind of impact that could have on the United States of America.
Wow. That's all I can say is wow, because all of this, especially when you think that all of this happened because Mohammed wanted to get back at his ex-wife. That's just, it's mind blowing. It's just unbelievable.
It truly is. I mean, obviously this was a new lesson for the profilers that we both know in the FBI to somebody come up with this kind of deranged idea to kill numerous dozens of people just to get back at his ex-wife. That's a whole lot of evil right there. There are frontline privileges to hell with a guy like that.
I would like to talk a little bit more about the HRT. What you can tell us. I know that many of the people who listen to the podcast are interested in law enforcement, either becoming an agent or working in any of the other agencies, municipal or federal. And I'm sure they would love to hear about what it takes to be a member of HRT. I have to tell you that when I was at the FBI Academy, whenever the HRT came in to the cafeteria, you could tell it was like you guys came out of central casting, all of these, good looking guys. And I will have to admit that I don't think there's been a woman yet who's qualified for HRT, or I don't even know if there's been a woman who has come out for HRT. So there are guys that are extremely well built.
Well, there have been, I believe, 4 females to try out for HRT. It's a very rigorous selection. The HRT selection is kind of based off of the Navy SEALs Hell Week. So, you're cold, wet, tired, miserable, and hungry for 2 weeks. And how do you react? How do you think? How do you treat others when you are at your worst? That's kind of what they measure. The HRT figures is that they can get you in shape and they can teach you to shoot, but they can't teach heart. They can't teach self-motivation. They can't teach your drive, your inner drive. So what the selection process on HRT is all about is to beat you down so low and so bad and now see how badly you want to pick yourself up and continue to fight. So the selection process is very, very rigorous. About 50% make it through the selection process. And then once you make it through, then you have to be selected by the HRT operators that are currently on the team. So that whittles it down to another 50%. There's only been less than 400 FBI agents that can carry the term HRT operator. I'm never more proud of anything in my life than being a member of the HRT family. Now, the history of the HRT is kind of interesting, if you got time for that.
Yeah, please.
The HRT was actually started as a direct result of the 1972 Munich Olympic Games massacre. Now, I know a lot of your listeners weren't even born in 1972, but if they do their history, they'll realize in 1972, the Summer Olympic Games held in Munich, Germany, that the PLO took 13 Israeli athletes hostage. And at that time, the Olympic Games were like the only televised world event. The entire world watched the Olympics back then. That was long before the internet, long before podcasts and satellites and everything else. So the world tuned in to the Olympic Games, and 13 Israeli athletes were held hostage by terrorists. They demanded transportation out of Munich to a place, I forgot where, but bottom line is they got to the airport, both the hostages and the hostage takers, and the police tried to do a rescue operation. In that rescue operation, every one of the athletes were killed, and several of the hostage takers escaped. This is 1972. At that time, the United States was already given the 1980 Lake Placid Winter Olympic Games and the 1984 Los Angeles Summer Olympic Games. So we were already provided that information. We're going to host those games. So at the conclusion of this hostage rescue debacle in Munich, President Nixon at the time got his Security Council together and asked them, okay, ladies and gentlemen, what is the U.S. response in the event our Lake Placid Winter Olympic Games or Los Angeles Summer Olympic Games are hit with the same kind of terrorist attack? What is our response? They didn't have an answer. Delta Force existed at the time, but was so secretive that the government didn't even acknowledge their existence. SEAL Team 6 didn't even exist in 1972. So the genesis of the HRT was a direct result of the 1972 Munich Olympic Games massacre and the fact that we had Olympic Games hosted in America 8 years later. So that was how the HRT got started, got a birth, and the very first team of operators that were selected ended up going down to Fort Bragg and trained alongside Delta Force for many, many, many months until they thought they were good enough to go on their own. And even today, the HRT maintains a very close relationship with Delta Force because they're the ones that initially trained the first group of operators for the HRT. We are a tier 1 unit. When I say tier 1 unit, there are only 3 tier 1 units in America. Everybody's heard of SEAL Team 6. Everybody's heard of Delta Force, and very few have ever heard of the HRT. But we train alongside with them. We operate with them. We consider them our brothers and do all the crazy things that they do, like jump out of airplanes and scuba dive and Draeger dive and do hostage rescue on airplanes, buses, subways, trains. So in the event there's a hostage situation in America, we're the first ones they call when it gets to be too difficult for the local SWAT team to handle. And again, we do operate overseas as well with our foreign counterparts and with we work close with the CIA and the other 2 departments that I mentioned earlier, Delta Force and SEAL Team 6, and helping locate and capture those most wanted.
I would imagine that you can only be on the HRT for a short period of time. I don't think it's an old man's game. So when did you join the HRT and how long were you on the team?
I went through the 1999 selection and got on the team in 1999 and left in 2005. I did 6 years on the team. And you're absolutely right, Jerry. It is definitely a young man's game. Jumping out of helicopters and airplanes and running and gunning and traveling the world. Your backs, your knees, your hips, they take a beating. That coupled with the fact that you're traveling extensively. I was on a team from 1999 to 2005, right at the height of the global war on terror. I know for a couple of years there, I was gone 8, 9, 10 months a year, and I was married and had kids at the time. So it's hard on the family. It's hard on your body. So most guys do about 5 or 6 years and then either go into an administrative position on the HRT or go back out to the field as a special agent.
Well, I actually was introduced to you, like I said, on LinkedIn, but it was through Jimmy Galliano. Were you on HRT at the same time with him?
I was definitely on the team with Gags. Yes, Jim Gagliano. We actually, I believe we went to Yemen together. I think we did an Iraq tour together as well. So yes, I know Jimmy very well. He is doing extremely well as a CNN law enforcement commentator up in New York City now. And he's a good man and a good friend.
Yeah, when I interviewed him on his episode, which of course I don't remember which number it was, the reason I asked the question is because I know that he also mentioned the responsibility of being away so much when you do have a family and, you know, that personal sacrifice that you make each time you're deployed.
Yeah, it's definitely hard on the family. In fact, in my book, you know, in the very last acknowledgments, I recognize my wife and I state that, you know, the bravest and the most warrior-like of us all are those spouses that go to bed at night knowing that their husbands are out there in harm's way, you know, on the tip of the spear, not knowing whether or not they'll ever see him again, but trying to sleep peacefully at night and trying to take care of the kids in the household, just never knowing. I mean, that's bravery. That's warriorhood right there.
Absolutely. Well, before we get into your book, because now I really, really want to hear about some of the tips and safety techniques you have for us, because all I'm thinking about is the sniper. But before we get into that, I have to ask my standard question, especially for you with your interest in HRT. That is, when you joined the FBI and why you joined the FBI.
Yeah, I joined the FBI in 1995. You know, I went to the U.S. Coast Guard Academy of College. I was always intrigued with the military and with the police. In the introduction of my book, I answered that same question because I'm asked it all the time. Why did you join the HRT? I think it's in our blood. I mean, it's in your blood. You don't do it for the money. You don't do it for fame or fortune. You do it because it's who you are. I mean, it sounds cliche to protect and serve, but you know, that's who we are. That's who you are. That's who I am. And every FBI agent that we had the honor of serving alongside is who they are. We truly, truly have that service heart, that service mentality that we want to protect others. So after leaving the Coast Guard, after 9 years, about the same time I was thinking about getting out of the Coast Guard, my brother had just joined the Secret Service. And I want to salute him. He did 25 years in the Secret Service. So he said, you know, federal law enforcement was a lot of fun. In the Coast Guard, I worked side by side with the DEA on many of my cases. So the DEA was recruiting me hard too and telling me all their amazing stories of what life is like as a federal law enforcement officer. So the more I heard about it, the more it intrigued me. And if you're going to go to federal law enforcement, I feel like the FBI is the best of the best. And that's who I wanted. That's who I applied to. And by the grace of God, they picked me and I had an amazing career and loved every minute of it. And look back with nothing but fond memories. You know, I just want to tell everybody out there that what you're seeing with the FBI today, all this chaos that's going on with all the political aspects of it and everything else, that's not the true FBI. That's a very few select individuals who made poor choices on the 7th floor. But 99.99% of your FBI agents are good American patriotic citizens that will give their life to protect yours. And I truly believe that in the bottom of my heart.
As everybody who listens to this podcast knows, that I am so proud of the 26 years that I served in the FBI, and I spend every day of my retirement showcasing the work that you and the other agents did. So
I would love to have your job, Jerry. I tell you, you probably know more historical facts about the FBI than anybody alive today. I find the best stories out there of the FBI, and you talk to people about it for an hour. I mean, you need to write a book about that, just all the crazy cases that you've heard over the last several years. I mean, what a great job you have. I'm so envious because you talk to, we talked earlier before this, and we both know a lot of the same people, of course, because the FBI is a very small family. But the number of stories that you have on just the most unique, special, and important cases in FBI history, you've heard them firsthand from those that were there. I mean, what a thrill that's got to be for you.
Yeah, it totally is. And the great thing about it is that I get to share it. I get to share it with the public and counteract all of the other stuff that's out there. Yeah. So the great thing is sharing those stories. And also one of the best things is helping the public stay safe. And so that's my segue to you giving up some of these great safety tips that you have, because unfortunately, in today's world with mass shootings and in Philadelphia, just this weekend, 28 people were shot. So it is not, our safety is not something that we should take lightly. We all need to know how to protect ourselves. So give up the wisdom. What can you tell us in, 5 or 10 minutes that is going to help every one of us, including me, because I no longer carry a gun. I made that choice. Yes, I did. I made that choice not to carry a weapon, to have a weapon. Tell me, how do I keep myself and my family safe?
Well, we just had an active shooter here yesterday in Dallas at the federal building. And of course, being an FBI agent here in Dallas, I've been in a federal building thousands of times. But fortunately, he was a pretty inept individual. He was wearing a balaclava, body armor, carrying a AR-15, and shot a lot of rounds into the federal building. He fortunately did not kill or injure anybody, and he was killed on site by the rapid response of the Federal Protective Service protecting that building. So, again, we just had one just yesterday here in Dallas.
Yeah.
FBI statistics say there's an active shooter every 3 weeks. Also, FBI statistics say there are over 500 mass shootings every year in America. Now, a mass shooting is where 4 or more people are killed. So that includes gang-related shootings. But 500 mass shootings a year? I mean, Jerry, you did 26 years in the FBI. One of the opening sentences that I say during all my presentations, I do a lot of public speaking because of the book. I do a lot of public speaking because, I just want to keep the public safe and I want to share my knowledge how to do that. But one of the opening sentences is, after 31 years in law enforcement, I understand that evil exists. And the most difficult aspect as a risk manager and security consultant is getting good people to understand and realize that evil exists. We're in a violent world. We don't have to understand it, condone it, like it, but we have to accept the fact that we do live in a violent world. In my book, Stay Safe, I really have 3 components I really talk about. The first component is survival mindset. The subtitle of my book is Survival is a Mindset, Not a Skill Set. And what I mean by that is you have to have that inner core belief that says you're not going to be beaten today. You're not going to be defeated today. And I use the Pulse nightclub tragedy as an example of that. 9 people ran into a restroom at the Pulse nightclub. Now they ran into the restroom because they knew their friends were being shot out on the dance floor. They escaped into the restroom, hearing the gunfire, hearing the screams of the dying. And when that shooter walked in that bathroom, he shot each of those individuals one at a time, 9 people. My question to my audience is, what prevented them from developing a plan and say, okay, when that guy walks in that bathroom door, here's what we're going to do. You grab his weapon. You over here, you grab his leg so he falls to the ground. You take your high heel off and start beating him with it. You gouge his eyes out. We're going to rip this guy apart limb by limb. We're not going to die today. A perfect example of that was the 9/11 hijacking with Todd Beamer. Let's roll. He got those people together and says, this plane is not going to crash. We're going to rescue this plane, take down those hijackers. But the same thing in the Pulse nightclub. Where was the survival mindset of those 9 individuals? Because even as a highly trained HRT operator, I cannot defeat 9 people who are rushing me at one time. I just can't do it. Chuck Norris couldn't do it. Okay. But so I really talk about developing that survival mindset and just having that will to survive. And then the second thing, Jerry, I talk about is situational awareness. If there's one thing that can keep you safe in today's more violent world, it's just having good situational awareness. It's looking for the anomalies in the environment. You're at a Starbucks and a guy's just sitting at a table by himself. No coffee in hand, no cell phone, not talking to anybody, no paper, no laptop. He's just sitting at a table by himself, staring into space. Is that the norm for a Starbucks environment? No. So if you walk into a Starbucks and see that, that should capture your attention. Now, I'm not saying he's up to no good or he's got nefarious ideas in his mind, but if all of a sudden he did stand up and start firing, you're already in front of that power curve. You already recognize him as a possible threat, and you're running out the door. So just, having good situational awareness of knowing where your exits are. Always have a plan. No matter what building you go into, always have an escape plan B and escape plan C. Know whether or not that the restrooms can lock from the inside. So to prevent somebody from coming into the restroom if you have the hard point there. Look for those anomalies in every environment. That's how the FBI caught the Boston Marathon bombers. 2 pressure cookers go off at the finish line. And what are all the spectators doing at the finish line? They're videotaping. So the FBI collected all those cell phones. I think it was 1,200. They collected 1,200 cell phones and looked at the videos of all those cell phones. Now, when the bomb goes off, what's the norm for that environment? The norm is chaos, panic, and fear, right? The bombs go off. What's everybody do? They look in the direction of where the bombs go. Well, the FBI looks at all these videos and they see a guy in a white baseball hat looking in the opposite direction when the bombs go off and looking very normal, like nothing's happening. Well, then they follow that guy using other cell phone footage and using the videos from the different storefronts and different retailers on the street, and they follow him, and he meets up with another guy. Ends up being his brother. Those were the 2 bombers. So this stuff works, Jerry. This stuff, you're looking for the anomalies in the environment, looking for what doesn't fit, works. So have great strength in your own survival mindset. Be aware you're surrounded of who's near you, what's near you, who's coming in, who's coming out. And the last thing is this. Should you ever be caught up, unfortunately, in an active shooter event, your best course of action is to always run. The hit rate on a moving target with a handgun is 4%. That means there's a 96% chance of not being shot by doing one thing, running. The average distance of an active shooter killing his victim in an active shooter event is less than 5 feet. Those that hide under their desk, those that hide in the closet, are those that die. Do not hide. Now you can barricade yourself, but once you barricade yourself, then you start looking for improvised weapons. Whether it's the high heel of your shoe, whether it's a tactical pen you have in your pocket, whether you break a glass off of a restroom mirror, or whether you break a leg off of a chair, or whether you use, a pair of scissors. Look for improvised weapons. Fight back. 4% hit rate on a moving target with a handgun. I'm so sick and tired of seeing these kids hide underneath their desks and getting shot. There's no need for that. Get up and run. Even if it means running around in a circle in a room with the shooter, he still has a 4% chance of hitting you. And then when he reloads, then you pounce on him. But 96% chance of not being shot by running. 5 feet or less is the average distance of active shooter. Those 2 facts alone should make you run like heck in the event you're ever caught at an active shooter event. So I talk about all that and more in my book. I talk about travel security, how you can be more secure traveling with improvised weapons, what floors of a hotel room do you stay in, what's your greatest threat when you travel? Get into a taxi cab. Okay?
Oh, really?
I talk about travel security, talk about home security, talk about corporate
Wait
security.
a minute, you got to go back. Why is the taxi one of the more vulnerable places to be?
Statistics show the most common cause of injuries for Americans traveling overseas is a motor vehicle accident. And 80% of those motor vehicle accidents are taxi accidents.
Wow.
You can't argue with stats. So the most common form of injury is motor vehicle accidents in a foreign country, foreign American.
Wow. I got a big trip coming up in September, Paris, Amsterdam, and Prague. I will not get into a taxi.
Well, I go to Brazil and think places like that. A lot of times the taxi drivers are working alongside the criminal element where they'll pull up to a stoplight and, 2 guys get into the back seat with you and put a gun to your head and take everything that you're wearing, including your wallet and your watch. And then a taxi cab driver claims innocence, but he's getting his cut at the end of the night from those 2 individuals. So, always use a driver service from the hotel if you can. Do your due diligence and find out if there are any good driving services that you can hire for the entire time you're there. So you have the same driver. always have documents such as driver's license, passports, health insurance, prescriptions, all the critical data that you have in your home. Make sure that's in the cloud somewhere. Contact list. If you lost your cell phone, would you be able to contact those people you need to contact? Because I know when we were both kids, we used to memorize 20 of our friends' phone numbers. I can't remember my wife's phone number half the time without looking at my cell phone. So have your contact list somewhere in the cloud so that if you had to, you could go to a internet cafe and call up your contact list with your credit card numbers on it, expiration dates, what numbers of the credit cards do you call if they get stolen. So if your entire wallet, cell phone, suitcase gets stolen, you at least have all that information somewhere that you can access while you're in the middle of Holland or France or somewhere else. That once, if you lose it, it gets, thrown overboard or grabbed in a robbery or you're pickpocketed. At least all that information, again, to include passport photos, driver's license, copy of your driver's license, and all the medical information and insurance information and travel information and contact list, all that somewhere that you can access it in the event that you lose it in one fell swoop.
All right, Greg. So if anybody was trying to take notes, I mean, that was so much information. and I know it's going to sound like, I'm trying to help you sell your book, but basically stop taking notes, people, and just go pick up a copy of Stay Safe: Security Secrets for Today's Dangerous World, because it sounds like, it sounds like you got a lot of great stuff at Amazon. Okay.
And also teach you how to get out of duct tape and handcuffs and rope in case you're ever kidnapped. So some fun things you can learn in there as well.
Wow. Oh, we should do a whole episode just on that. But no, we'll send everybody to your book. So this has been absolutely fantastic. Now, I did read your bio before we started this interview, but I know one of the things I just want to touch on, just for a little bit, is all the work that you've been doing on, TV spots and commentary. How did you get into that?
Just word of mouth. I had a friend who worked at a local CBS affiliate, and they brought me on board to discuss that tragic event here in Dallas where 5 police officers were shot and killed during that demonstration of the Black Lives Matter protest here. And they had a guy shooting from a parking garage and killed 5 police officers on July 5th a couple of years ago. And during the funeral and memorial service, President Obama was here, former President Bush was here, Vice President Biden was here, and the local CBS affiliate carried it live, and they had me on the set to do live, commentary on what we were seeing and everything. And it just kind of spiraled from there. You do one job on one television station, and other stations see you, and if they like what they saw, they tend to call you. So, it's just good friends recommending me getting out there and offering my services up to television stations when there is an active shooter, doing public commentary at civic organizations for free, talking about active shooter response. You just never know who's in the audience. So it just kind of just builds upon itself. Well,
definitely, if there are listeners in the Dallas area who would like to reach out to you and have you make a presentation to their group, then do you have a website?
I do have a website. It's ShafferSecurityGroup.com. And the trick is to spell Shaffer right. It's SHAFFER. So ShafferSecurityGroup.com. I do keynote speaking. I do a lot of public speaking all across the globe now. I would love to come and talk to your organization, again, because I still have that inner need, the inner desire, the inner want to help people stay safe and to help society and keep them safe from the evil that's in this world.
Well, it's been great talking to you. And again, I just want to mention your book, Stay Safe: Security Secrets for Today's Dangerous World. The last thing, though, before you get away, I always like to give my guest the last word. So the floor is yours.
Jerry, thank you so much for having me. It's an honor and a privilege. Again, I look at all your podcasts and the people that you've had on your show. Many are heroes of mine. Some are mentors of mine. And I am just honored beyond belief that you would have me on your show to talk about the DC sniper investigation from way back when. Thank you for your service. Thank you for being a sister of mine through the FBI. Thank you for what you do. Good luck in your book sales. And if anybody wants to learn how to stay safe, please buy my book. As Jerry mentioned, it's on Amazon, and I look forward to hearing everybody's feedback.
And that's the end of the interview. Back at jerrywilliams.com, you'll find a picture of Greg Shaffer. There's even a cool one with him wearing all of his HRT gear. There are lots of links to newspaper and FBI website articles about the D.C. sniper case and the HRT. There's actually an article that has tons and tons of photos, a photo gallery of all of the crime scenes and the evidence in the D.C. sniper case. And of course, there's a link to where you can pick up a copy of Greg's book, Stay Safe: Security Secrets for Today's Dangerous World. I hope you enjoyed the episode and that you'll share it with your friends, family, and associates. If they're not sure how to listen to a podcast, have them read the post on my website, How to Listen to a Podcast. And don't forget to subscribe to FBI Retired Case File Review on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Pandora, or anywhere you listen to audio. This podcast is where I talk about true crime, but if you also enjoy watching crime dramas and reading crime fiction, then you want to join my reader team. When you do, you'll get a copy of my FBI reading resource, which is a list of all the books about the FBI written by the FBI agents who have been on this podcast. True crime, memoirs, and crime novels. And, in case you missed the big announcement, FBI Myths and Misconceptions, a manual for armchair detectives, is now out and available worldwide as an ebook, paperback, and hardback, wherever books are sold. And guess what? My crime novels, Pay to Play and Greedy Givers, are now also available worldwide wherever books are sold. So if you enjoy reading police procedurals, I hope you consider picking up copies of the books in my FBI Philadelphia Corruption Squad series. I want to thank you for listening to the very end, and I hope you come back for another episode of FBI Retired Case File Review with Jerry Williams. Thank you.